Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Innervoice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and welcome to the Innervoice show. This show is about making a difference in your life so that you can create a free mind, yes, a free mind, and a heart filled with love toward creating a fulfilling life for yourself and everyone around you. I'll bring the latest research in the realm of human sciences, and we'll talk to experts in their field to bring you the jewel of their knowledge and wisdom. Let me tell you a bit about my book, Life Reset, The Awareness Integration Path to Creating a Life You Want. This is the latest psychological model that I present to you in a series of exercises, which you can complete in your own time. This book is about Awareness Integration Path, which is a model that I created, and it's been researched and published in many groups, and the latest research was done in Cal State Long Beach students with 132 students and resulted in a 68% decrease in depression and 25% reduction in anxiety. And that was actually in a self-study format. When we did the research on in therapy mode, we got 75% minimization in depression and 63% reduction in anxiety, and raising in self-esteem 43% and self-efficacy. You can get the Life Reset book from my website, Foojan.com. And if you'd like to consult with me, I have offices in Beverly Hills, Irvine, and Woodland Hills, and I do consulting online. So go to Foojan.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I am so excited. We'll be right back with Dr. David Burns. But before that, with the research on self-esteem. So the latest research, as it came in Science News, is staking self-worth on the pursuit of money has negative psychological consequences. This research was published April 27, 2017. Although people living in consumer-based cultures, such as the U.S., often believe that they will be happier if they acquire more money, the findings of a newly published paper by the University of Buffalo suggest that there may be downsides to this pursuit. The pursuit of money in and out of itself is not bad, but the risk to consider when it is fueled by a desire to boost self-esteem. When people tie their self-worth to the pursuit of financial success, they're more vulnerable to negative psychological consequences, according to Laura Park, an associate professor of psychology at University of Buffalo and the study's lead author. Specifically, basing self-esteem on financial success predicted making more financially based social comparisons with others, feeling less autonomy and control over one's life, and experiencing more financial hassles, stress, and anxiety. These findings were evident even after accounting for other variables such as financial status, materialistic values, and importance of financial goals. Park says people don't often think of the possible downsides of wrapping their identity and self-worth around financial pursuits because our society values wealth as a model of how one should be in the world. It's important to realize these costs because people are gravitating toward this domain as a source of self-esteem, without realizing that it has these unintended consequences. So Park says when the researchers asked people to write about a financial stressor, they experienced a drop in their feelings of autonomy. They also showed more disengagement from their financial problems. They gave up searching for solutions. They didn't find this in people who didn't tie their self-esteem to financial success or among those who were asked to write about an academic stressor. They also found that people who highly based their self-worth on financial success used more negative emotion-related words like sadness and anger. This demonstrates that just thinking about a financial problem generates a lot of stress and negative emotions for those individuals. But Park says this effect is eliminated if you get people to self-affirm by giving them an opportunity to think about their personal strengths. This suggests that self-esteem concerns emerge from people when people are thinking about financial problems. But if they can repair their self-esteem by having them think about their strengths, then there is no reduction in feeling of autonomy. And a final study found that people who based their self-esteem on financial success and were led to believe that they would experience financial instability in their future became more cautious when it came to extravagant spending decisions. This could be interpreted as a desire of these individuals to protect their self-esteem following this financial threat.
Hello?
Well,
hello?
Welcome, Dr. David Burns.
Thank you. I have no idea what you've been talking about because the reception became so garbled that I couldn't understand, except that you had some pretty good comments about the dangers of basing your self-esteem on income or wealth. But aside from that's all I picked up. But I'm delighted to be on the show today. Thank you for having me.
It is always a joy to have you. Let me introduce you, although you don't need any introduction, and I hope that all of our audience gets to know you and have known you, especially with your book that has been sold to 4 million copies in the United States and in many around the world, Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy. So let me tell the audience about you. Dr. David Burns received his MD from Stanford University School of Medicine and completed his psychiatry residency at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He has served as acting chief of psychiatry and at the Presbyterian University of Pennsylvania Medical Center and visiting scholar at the Harvard Medical School, and is certified by the National Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. Dr. Burns is currently adjunct clinical professor emeritus of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the Stanford University School of Medicine, where he is involved in research and teaching. He has received numerous awards, including the Bennett Award for his research on brain chemistry, the Distinguished Contribution to Psychology through the Media Award, and the Outstanding Contributions Award from the National Association of Cognitive Behavioral Therapists. He's been named Teacher of the Year 3 times from the class of graduating residents at Stanford University School of Medicine, which this is the best award that you could ever get. In addition to his academic research, Dr. Burns has written a number of popular books on mood and relationship problems, and best-selling book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy, has sold over 4 million copies in the United States and many around the world. So I'm so delighted to have you on this show and to talk about self-esteem, because self-esteem is one of those concepts that everybody wants it, everybody talks about it, and then yet has this kind of an unknown concept about it, as if when it were conditioned, then it's set, like it's set in cement, and we have no idea what to do with it. So if we could talk about what is self-esteem, how do you define self-esteem?
Well, great question, and the way I think about it is that well, there's a lot of ways to think about it, but essentially the first distinction would be, what's the difference between self-confidence and self-esteem? Well, self-confidence is the knowledge that you're going to do a pretty good or a very good job at something. For example, I've worked with you, I think, at least twice before on, at the time, I think it was your TV show.
Yes.
And I just love doing interviews with you. We have great chemistry. You have tremendous knowledge and skill as an interviewer and as a media person. So I'm pretty confident that we'll have a good interview today that will be interesting to people and hopefully kind of fun and dynamic. But self-esteem, I define as the ability to like yourself and love yourself and accept yourself when you fail, to the same extent as when you do something that you're successful at. Self-esteem, unconditional self-esteem is more like love, the love that you would give yourself. Just as, for example, if you had a child who fell and scraped his or her knee and runs to you in pain and screaming, and you'd pick the child up in your arms and comfort him or her and love her, and love your child and nurture her and comfort your child. And that love is something you give freely. It's not something that your child has to earn. But we do get very, very confused in our society, and I think it's been going on, I would guess, for 50,000 years, that we tell ourselves that there are certain things that we need, that we have to be a worthwhile human being. And so we may say, I have to have success to be worthwhile, or I must be loved to be worthwhile, or I need everyone's approval to be worthwhile. And then it's so easy to go around comparing yourself to other people. I could be saying, well, gosh, I have a new podcast some of your listeners might like. It's a free Feeling Good podcast I do every week with a colleague, and you can find it on my website, feelinggood.com, or iTunes, or wherever. And we're kind of pretty proud that we've built up our audience to this last month. We had 47,000 downloads, which is just fantastically exciting to me. But then I got invited to be on someone else's podcast, and I asked them how big their audience was. I think they get like 50 or 80,000 downloads on every single episode. And so you could be telling, or I could say, gosh, how do you pronounce your first name? Foojan? Or?
Foojan.
Foojan. I could say, wow, Foojan is so much more successful than David Burns in the media. You've got radio shows and TV shows and, a tremendous following, and you're just doing beautiful, beautiful work. But then I could say, well, I'm no good because I'm not successful enough. And that's kind of how we think and how we feel, and it can create tremendous pain. I've probably treated now a good 35,000 therapy sessions or more with people struggling with severe depression and anxiety, and in most of those cases, the key to the suffering was this belief: I'm not good enough. I should be better than I am, because some people have even had the thinking, I'm only making $40,000 a year, and that's not enough to be worthwhile. And I said, well, how much would you have to earn to be worthwhile? He said, $80,000, and therefore I think I should commit suicide because I'm worthless. And these thoughts really can kill these ways we try to measure our worthwhileness as a human being.
Dr. Byrne, it seems like, as I hear you, self-esteem is related to self-worth, approval, acceptance, and love that we have for ourselves. And the self-confidence comes from the ability to master a task, or having the confidence that we have
to be really good at something. Then you figure, I'll be successful at this. But that doesn't make you a more worthwhile human being. But the problem is we translate wants into needs. I want to have a good show today. I want to be loved by my family and by my colleagues, and to have a great relationship. So there's nothing wrong. I'm working on a new book now, and I want to do a good job on that book, or maybe hope to have a great book. You never know how something's going to turn out. But that's different from saying I must have success. I must be loved. And when you turn wants into needs, that's when you set yourself up for a lot of depression and anxiety.
Well,
but it's hard to break out of these patterns because it seems so real to us that our worthwhileness depends on our achievements. That's the basis of Western civilization. It's the Calvinist work ethic. You are what you do.
Right.
So if you do great things, you're a great human being. If you do bad things, you're a bad or worthless human being. And we're kind of raised to think that way from the time we're kids.
Exactly. And if we're conditioned by the way that the society has giving us some feedback, whether the first society is our parents and then teachers and peers and all, the work environment and then media, and all of it where it tells us who would we be if we're good, and then if we're not good, how to be punished or get consequences. There's a way that we receive the terms and conditions, let's say, of self-esteem and self-confidence, and then we internalize them, and then we operate through that. So is there a way to even change self-esteem for someone who's been conditioned with a lot of negativity inside of them toward shifting and being someone else as they grow up, or if they decide that they want to love themselves and they've never had a role model?
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of the story of my life and career and my book, Feeling Good, and the therapy techniques I've been developing. By the way, I just have a quick question for you, and then we'll get into cognitive distortions and negative thoughts and how they create a loss of self-esteem and how you can modify them. In fact, I saw two people in my training group last night who were both experiencing a loss of self-esteem and anxiety and inadequacy, and I'll tell you what their negative thoughts were and how we went about changing them quickly, brought them from a state of intense anxiety and kind of despair and kind of feeling worthless and shameful and inadequate to just exuberance and joy in just a matter of minutes with some of the newer techniques. But if there's going to be a commercial, you could call me back, because I can barely understand you when you're talking. There's just some garbleness on the line here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to put a music on, and then I'll call you right back. Let's do it that way.
Should we do it now or wait for a commercial? Or
no, right now.
Do it now?
Yeah.
No one here to guide you. Now you're on your own. No one's here beside you. Still, you're not alone. No one.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, it's still tremendously garbled. Can you try the other number?
I've tried the other number. So let's, can you hear me at all?
Yeah. It's
perfect.
workable.
Let's just go ahead, because as we're talking to each other, and the audience are also with us, listening to us, because this is a live show. So
sure, that'll be fine.
Okay, so we were talking about the ability to take in what the world has given us, and we generalized it and put it inside of ourselves, internalized it, and now we want to come back into a space where, this is no longer going to work for me. I was born into a space where that was the message, but I get it. This just doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm in the space of wanting to shift the way that I've been thinking that is no longer workable.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the first, principle that can help you change your life, really, is the basis of cognitive therapy, and it's so simple that a lot of people can't understand it. I know we've talked about it on your show before, but it's the idea that our moods are created entirely by our thoughts. It's not what happens to you, but the way you think about it. And so whether you've had, horrible or traumatic experiences, as I've recently done a trauma workshop around the U.S., and I do a live demonstration with someone who's had horrific trauma at each workshop, and I ask, what are you telling yourself? What are the thoughts? Because the trauma, which could have been like one woman had 30 years of rape and beatings before she finally was able to separate from her husband, but you can't take away the facts of your life, the circumstances of your life, and it's not what's happened to you or what's happening to you right now, but your thoughts about it. And for example, she was telling herself, I must be defective. That's why I was abused for 3 decades. And that thought created her, in her case, severe depression, extraordinary rage, and extraordinarily intense anxiety. And the great thing about it is you can't change reality, but you can change the way you think about it. And when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. And the effects can be dramatic, profound, and pretty much a total blow-away of feelings of shame and depression and anxiety. And it can often happen using some of the new techniques that we've developed in just maybe 2 hours of therapy, or like the people I saw last night, I worked with last night, just in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes in many cases. Now that's one important principle. When you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. But people right now who are listening to this broadcast who feel anxious or inadequate or inferior or depressed or worthless, you have thoughts in your mind right now. You're telling yourself things. Like, you may be feeling angry at David right now, saying, then you have a thought like, oh, David's a con artist. Dr. Burns is a con artist. What he's saying sounds too good to be true. And that thought causes your anger. Or you may be feeling happy and saying, oh, David has something, there's something new, there are fast, powerful treatments for depression and anxiety without drugs. This is great. This is cool. I'm excited. And once again, I'm not causing you to feel excited. It's the thought. And then the second thing about it, well, and you can just write your thoughts down on a piece of paper. That's how we always start out the therapeutic intervention. See, what is this person telling himself or herself? And then the second thing is you look at that thought, and I have in my book, Feeling Good, a list of 10 cognitive distortions. You see, the second principle is those negative thoughts that upset you are frauds. Depression and anxiety are the world's oldest cons. You're telling yourself things that really are not true. And then when you correct those distortions, bang, your negative feelings will suddenly disappear and quickly. Now let's take the thought of this woman, that I did the live demonstration with, who was saying, she was telling herself, like, I must be defective, that's why my husband abused me. She was saying it was my fault, I should have gotten out of the marriage sooner, and she was in front of a live audience of 100 mental health professionals. She was a brave lady, for sure, and she had the thought that these people in the audience, they're probably judging me, and they're saying, oh, how could she possibly be a mental health professional when she can't even help herself? So she's imagining how they're thinking. And then when you look at these 10 distortions, we could kind of go through a few of them and see if we can find any distortions in this thought, I'm defective. Now, one of them that you were mentioning earlier before the broadcast started, Foojan, is all or nothing thinking, where you look at things in black and white categories. There's no shades of gray. Would you say that that's an example of all or nothing thinking?
Yes, and we generalize usually in order to protect ourselves, and then yet the same type of generalization and then making it to the two opposite concepts really limits us and puts us in a bound.
Oh yeah. The all or nothing thinking is just inherent in perfectionism. If I'm not a complete success, I'm a total failure, and it's inherent in all of the world and in all of depression. I mean, and when you look at the world in black and white, it doesn't make sense. All or nothing categories don't correspond to reality. And this woman, for example, she has plenty of flaws. We all have plenty of flaws, but she has had tremendous strengths as well. And after she got divorced from her husband, she went ahead and she got a PhD in clinical psychology and developed a tremendous clinical practice working with abuse victims. So she certainly has tremendous strengths and a whole lot to be proud of. But when you're depressed and you get into this all or nothing, because I screwed up and this and that, I'm a total, failure as a human being. And then it's also an overgeneralization. And another one of the 10 distortions, she's generalizing from some facts of her life, some negative events, to herself. Instead of saying, I had horrific experiences and perhaps made errors that I can now correct in the way I relate to men, the way I relate to people, she's saying, I have a self that's defective. And that's the overgeneralization, as if you have this broken, defective self, like a broken radio tube from the old days when they had tubes and radios.
You also talked about mental filtering. Say more about
it's mental filter, sure. She's just thinking about all the negatives in her life and filtering out the positives, and even saying the positives don't even count. And you do that when you feel bad. I did a talk show years ago when I was on touring a little bit for my book Feeling Good, and I met this cool guy in Cincinnati, and he had an hour talk show every morning on the local television and with a live audience, and I was on, and it was a really fun show. He was a little like you. He was really this upbeat, personable, neat guy. But afterwards, he said, "Oh, doctor, could you give me a little help before you go? Because I get real depressed too." And I said, well, tell me about that. And he says, well, after each show, I'll get like 300 fan letters. And there'll be 299 glowing ones and one bad one. And to tell you the truth, I dwell and obsess on that bad one all day long. And that's a classic example of mental filter.
Right.
And then discounting the positive, all those 299 good things don't count. Now, another distortion in her thought, I must be defective. Then she came up with this when we were looking at the list of 10 distortions, is mind reading. And this went like a light bulb in her brain. When she saw this, she says, oh my gosh, I think I've been telling myself that the reason my husband beat me and raped me was because he could see that I was defective, and that's all I could ever hope for in a love relationship. But now, for the first time, that seems idiotic. He beat me and raped me because he was a psychopath.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with my inherent worth as a human being. And that was the first in a series of several revelations that unfolded over maybe 10 or 15 minutes that led to a complete, elimination of her depression, a complete recovery once she recognized these distortions and then decided to talk to herself in the way she would talk to a dear friend or the way she would talk to a patient. I said, would you say to a dear friend, it's your fault that your husband abused you. He abused you because you're defective. She said, no, I'd never say something horrible. And I said, how would you talk to a dear friend or to a patient? And then she modeled that, and she did a beautiful job. And then I said, would you be willing to talk to yourself like that? And it was it just really blew her mind. It was so beautiful to see this joy finally come to life in this beautiful, powerful woman.
I'm experiencing that.
Just right before our eyes. And then the last thought, she was able just to blow away all of her negative thoughts that she'd written down. She had about 10 of them. It was my fault. I victimized myself. I should have gotten out of the marriage sooner. She was able to put the lie to all of those thoughts. And then the only one she couldn't defeat was the people in the audience are judging me. Mm-hmm. They're looking
Another
down
type
on
of
me.
a projection.
How do you think, Foojan, we could challenge that
Right.
thought with her?
Well, it seems like there's another level of mind reading and projection that is happening. So the type of her trying to see and read other people and then from there conditioned to who she is was something that she was really conditioned in. So reminding her again that she's mind reading.
Exactly. And so how could we get her to test this belief in front of the live audience?
Check it out.
And how would she do that?
Ask people who are there. It's
exactly
one of the easiest ways to check out reality.
And she said, "Oh man, that terrifies me."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, that means it's a good idea. If it didn't terrify you, it wouldn't be worth doing." And so she took the microphone and said, "Would any of you be willing to come up here to the front and tell me how you feel about me? Are you judging me? What do you feel about what I've done here in the last hour and a half with Dr. Burns?" And all these people came up to the stage, and one by one they took the microphone and with sobbing and said, "You're my hero. I was abused too, and I've been too ashamed to admit it.
Right.
And what you did today just blew my mind." And then some fellow got up and he said, "I'd take a bullet for you if I had to."
Wow.
And it was so moving, and the people in the audience were all in tears. It was just like a miracle, and that's why I so much love treating people with depression and low self-esteem, because it's just so neat to have techniques that work really fast.
Dr. Burns.
And to see someone just transformed before your eyes, it's just the most fabulous thing in my life. And now I see this happening with most of the people I treat. Just the first time I sit down with them, see a total elimination of symptoms and see them go from despair to laughter and joy and euphoria. And it's possible for every person. But the problem is so many people listening to the show right now have felt worthless and inadequate, and a lot of them have had antidepressant pills and therapy for years with no change, and you kind of begin to think that you're a hopeless case, and so the suffering can be incredibly intense.
Right. I also hear that you're saying self-esteem is somehow, well, not only the symptomology, but also sometimes the causality of the depression and anxiety. I know when I was doing research on my model, awareness integration, I found a lot of times when we were using depression and anxiety scales and looking and really working on self-esteem, that as self-esteem rose, that depression and anxiety kind of came, lowered. And I'm hearing the same conversation.
In fact, the self-esteem is the same as depression, a loss of self-esteem. That's one of the actual key symptoms of depression, and so low self-esteem and depression are just kind of like synonyms, really. But as you have just pointed out, you see it in all forms of anxiety too, like social anxiety, thinking people are going to judge you if they see that you're nervous, or they see that you're insecure, or feeling like you're not good enough. We're always judging ourselves and saying, I'm not good enough. Another huge contributor to this was the feminist psychiatrist Karen Horney, and she figured a lot of this out in the 1890s and early 1900s, I think was kind of when she did her thing around the time of Freud. She was a psychoanalyst, but very practical. And she had this thing called the tyranny of the shoulds. Yeah. And she said a lot of our suffering comes about because we have this mental construct of who we should be, the person we think we should be, this flawless, fantastic person. And I used to think that way when I was starting my practice in psychiatry. I used to think, I'm going to be just the best psychiatrist in the world. I'm just going to be so fantastic, and I'm going to cure every patient, and I'm never going to accept failure. And it was a very kind of grandiose notion, but it addicted me to this kind of all or nothing thinking, but it created tremendous drive to create new therapy techniques. But I struggled a lot because when patients were saying, Dr. Burns, you're not helping me, it just irritated me and threatened me so much. And so I would start pushing and get into kind of a power struggle with certain patients. And then one day I decided to let that self die, the self that had to be so great, and just accept myself as a flawed human being. And then when patients said to me, "Oh, Dr. Burns, you're not helping me," I was suddenly able to say, you're right. I haven't been helpful to you, and I'm so sad about that because I have tremendous respect for you, but I can imagine how angry you feel and how hurt you feel and how hopeless you feel. Tell me about it. Let's see if we can get on the same page together. What you're saying is so important. And then suddenly the heavens opened up, and when I didn't need to be so great anymore, just life became great. And I just see that all the time. That it's been such a shock to me that when my students seem to love me the most is when I talk about my errors, my own insecurities, my own shortcomings. And then when they do personal work on the Sunday hikes, I have these free Sunday hikes for the people in my training groups, and we hike for 3-4 hours, and I do personal work with the people who come. It's just another free thing I do to help the local therapist in this community. But when they open up and share their vulnerabilities and they cry, everybody feels so close to them. And then when they get transformed and go from despair to laughter and joy and euphoria, we all kind of get happy together. But the key to it is giving up this idea that I should be this great person, this great achiever, this person who is way beyond who I am. And that's where all of our struggle, that's all of our pain comes from that. And enlightenment comes when you accept yourself as a flawed human being. And the Buddhists call that the great death, the death of the ego.
Right.
And people are afraid to die, but it's great to die because after you're dead, you join the Grateful Dead. and so you're not afraid of anything anymore, and you can be open and you can connect with people in such a deep and beautiful way. But
So
it's an intense struggle.
It's the death of your fears, that you're the death of the structure of the perfectionism on a pedestal concept,
Yeah.
the shittism that we created from the world as it came to us and told us, oh, don't do this, and a good girl does this, and a good boy does that, and if you want people to love you, you got to do this. So we create this type of an idealistic sense of a person, a sense, that Foojan should be this or David should be that. And then we constantly try to live up to it, which we keep facing coming short. And then when we try to prove to the world that I am, and the world sees it and I know it that I'm not, then that's where the power struggle starts. Where if I say, yeah, that's something that I'm striving toward, but God knows I'm human and at many times I'm not that, or that I even let go of striving toward that and then accepting myself as who I am and love myself, strive toward the best that I can ever be, but not be responsible and accountable to it, but not to create a shouldism where I can punish myself and the world for not seeing me as that.
Foojan, are you striving to be the best that you can possibly be? I think you just said that.
I said that, and then I am striving to do that. And I also get that there are times that although I know, for example, not to eat this or exercise, and there are many things that I know that I should, and in the moment of action, I choose not to. So there is a part of me that has idealized striving to be the best, and yet I know that in many times I even choose not to do that.
Absolutely. When I was supervising psychiatric residents at Stanford, I supervised this resident named Matt, who's subsequently blossomed into just a truly fantastic psychotherapist. Although he's an MD, a psychiatrist, he's just so gentle and so compassionate. But I used to supervise him 3 hours a week. We'd have pizza, go over his cases, then do personal work and that type of thing. That's how you do when you work with psychiatric residents, training them in psychotherapy. And one day we were driving back to my house, and we came to a stop sign, and he turned and looked at me in a real sincere way and said, "Oh, Dr. Burns, I just want you to know that every day I'm struggling and working so hard to be a better person and to be the very best that I can be. And I looked back at him and I said, "Man, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope you get over that pretty soon." And then he burst into laughter, and he got his enlightenment at just that moment. And it's this idea that somehow we have to strive to be the best that we can be, and that somehow achieving these goals we have is going to lead to some kind of enlightenment or joy, and enlightenment really kind of exists in the opposite direction. We probably talked about my cats on previous podcasts, but my beloved Obi was this feral cat we adopted from the woods. He was a violent predator, and but he came to us very wounded after a fight, and we saved his life, and then he kind of wanted us to adopt him, and he went from violent and terrified of humans to becoming my best friend in the world. But he wasn't a special cat at all. He wasn't a purebred. He was just what we used to call alley cats when I was a kid growing up in Denver, and they'd live in the alleys and get food out of the garbage and like that. And he was just an ordinary cat, but I just loved him so much, and he loved me so much, and when we were together, the heavens just opened up. And he taught me that when you no longer have to be special, life becomes special.
Yeah.
And boy, I loved him so much, and we had 8 good years with him. He would get on my chest at night and knead me and drool and purr excitedly, and when we were outside, he would follow me around like a puppy dog. He was just so proud. He wanted the neighbors to see that he belonged to me, and then we lost him sadly about a year ago. He disappeared in the middle of the night. He was feral to the core and had to go out hunting, for a girlfriend or for prey at night, and probably got eaten by the mountain lion that lives behind our house in the woods, or the coyotes. It was so sad. But he taught me that where the magic of life really comes from, and there's nothing wrong with achievement.
Yes.
But that's not where the greatest joy, that's not where the enlightenment occurs.
Right. There's a part, though, as I hear you, and as you have worked with children and I have worked with children, there is a part that a healthy ego has to be set. There are many times that as a child we want to be special. A lot of the sibling rivalries are there. We strive to look at approval from our parents and teachers to figure out who we are. And I think there are many times when the ego is there from childhood, sometimes it even turns into what's the point, and the depression shows up. There's a process that it appears to go into creating a self, and then creating a specialness about who we are, not necessarily toward others, but to see how special we are, and then let go of the specialness. Because tell me your experience, Dr. Burns. I've seen most of letting go happen in the older years of life. It's almost like, there's a process of building and then getting limited, and then letting go of the limitations, although the foundation of who we are as a self has been created.
I think you're right about that. I think there is a tendency to mellow as we get older, but I also feel that people can learn these things as kids.
Yes.
I taught them a lot of this stuff to my daughter when she was a freshman in high school, and it made a tremendous difference. And she'd been feeling pretty down and thinking she wasn't one of the special people, and there are these popular special people, and it's genetic and it's inherited, and I said, no, it's just a matter of things that you learn, and I can teach you to manipulate boys and make them chase after you and this type of thing. We just had a tremendous time with it. It was so much fun, and she learned, and she learned quickly. But yes, initially you probably want to develop a good sense of pride and feel that you are special and feel like you have a self and feel like you have self-esteem. But then I always say, once you've got self-esteem, get rid of it as fast as you can, because it's just another perfectionistic trap. I lost my self-esteem one day when I was jogging home from the train station in Philadelphia, and I was just jogging along, and it just fell off. And I thought, man, that's a relief. I don't have to carry that crap around with me anymore. And then a couple more steps, my self fell off, and I didn't have a self or an identity anymore, and I still don't.
So the detachment creates that type of a freedom where you can be, because you found it and you can always find it again, and then you can let it go without being afraid of not knowing who you are.
That's like finding crap again. I wouldn't want to find. If I found, I'd just kick it out of the way there again. But yes, you see, the idea that you have a self is like a mental prison that you're in.
But you're also saying, like when we started, we talked about the negativity, but I'm also hearing you say the overjoy of the positivity is also limiting. It's like the both end, it's it holds you back versus being this fluid person who is enjoying every minute as it just goes along. And even the enjoyment can be enjoying the sadness or enjoying something that
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff what you're saying, and it's spirituality as much as it is psychology. I'm not particularly religious. In fact, in all fairness, you could say I'm anti-religious, but I was the son of a Lutheran minister, and when I was little, everyone assumed I was going to be a minister when I grew up. But the odd thing is, in my elder years here, I'm seeing, although my life has been committed to developing psychotherapy techniques and helping people break out of depression and anxiety, I'm beginning to see more and more that recovery from depression and anxiety is a relationship conflict or an habit or addiction is an inherently spiritual experience as much as it is a psychological experience. And there's really 4 deaths of the self. The Buddha talked about the great death, the death of the ego, but there's actually 4 different great deaths. One corresponds to recovery from depression. One corresponds to recovery from all of the anxiety disorders. One corresponds to transforming an angry, conflicted relationship into a loving one. That's a third kind of painful death of the ego. And then recovery from a habit or addiction involves another death of the ego.
Yeah. Well, I know that every time I've, just to let the audience know that every time I've talked with you in the television shows or radio shows, I've learned so much. And actually last year in American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, we were lecturing side by side, and your audience was something like 1,000 people, and mine was like maybe 200, and we were talking about that. And it was funny because all I wanted to know was to leave my lecture and come over and listen to yours. And I was actually lecturing, and 1,000 people were laughing, crying, coming, and myself and everybody who was listening to me, and I kept saying, don't all of us wish just to go and hear Dr. David Burns there? So I always learn from you, and I'm so glad that I'm going to be at the Brief Therapy Conference in San Francisco at end of this month, and this time hopefully I get to hear you. And that
at the end of the year, you mean in December?
Yes, December. So
great, that's wonderful. Yeah, maybe you can come and visit our Tuesday group. You know of Albert Ellis, right?
Yes. He forwarded my first book in online therapy.
Oh, really?
Yes,
yeah. Well, he was a character. Sadly, he's passed away a number of years ago, but he was a wild guy. I never knew him well, but I always admired him a lot. And but he was, really wild. And once when I was in New York, he invited me up to give a talk for a workshop he was doing on his so-called rational emotive therapy, and so I did it, and then we were walking toward an elevator, and he was very narcissistic, so I always like to say things to flatter him, kind of like how you do with me. So
I don't see him as narcissist at all.
Type. So I said, Dr. Ellis, everywhere I go around the country giving a workshop, if I have 300 people in Detroit, you were just there 2 weeks earlier with 600 people.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, you always draw the biggest crowds, and I have to hand it to you. And he says, well, Dave, you know why that is? That's how he talked. He had that kind of New York drawl. And I says, no, Dr. Ellis, why is that? And he says, well, you don't use the F word enough.
exactly. He was the only one who could really get away with the F word everywhere. And I watched him, and it was spectacular. It was brilliant.
Yeah, every other word that came out of his mouth was the F word, and then he'd always have at least 200 Catholic priests in the audience there to kind of be angry with him and shame him, but they were so curious they couldn't stay away. So I thought, well, I better do what my mentor here tells me to do. And so the next workshop I had was in New Orleans. And I wasn't thinking of the fact that that's the Bible Belt country down there. And so I threw in a whole lot of F words, and I got the worst workshop evaluations at the end of the day. So I decided to stop using the F word.
Yeah, that was good for him. He was a character. But thank you so much for always giving the time to me, and I learn from you, and I always know that the audience that I have, my listeners, my viewers, always learn from you. When I post it all over with the therapist, those podcasts and TV shows get the most talked about, and they say how much they enjoy it. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon. And I want everybody who's listening to go to feelinggood.com, and there are so many fantastic information and perks and blogs and podcasts and all of it there for them to be. So thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, you're awesome. Looking forward to seeing you again. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Same here. Thank you. And for all of you who are listening, thank you so much for listening with your heart, and create a fantastic, beautiful, enjoyable day and a minute and a year for yourself and everyone. Until next week with Antonio Damasio. Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.